My name is Emily, and I still remember something that happened to me when I was 13. It happened one evening when my dad sent me to a small convenience store a few blocks from our apartment. It was around 8 at night, and I had made the walk dozens of times before. The neighborhood wasn't the safest, but I never really thought much about it. That evening, I just wanted to grab some snacks and get back home. I walked into the store, picked up a soda and a bag of chips, and headed toward the register. That's when I noticed an older man standing near the entrance. He wasn't buying anything. He was just standing there, staring through the glass doors. As I walked past him, he suddenly looked directly at me. Then he smiled. It wasn't a normal, friendly smile. It was wide and completely out of place. I looked away and tried not to think about it. After paying, I stepped outside. The man was still there. I started walking home, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, but after a few seconds, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. The man was walking in my direction. My stomach dropped. I sped up. So did he. I didn't run because I didn't want him to know I was scared. Instead, I crossed the street and took a different route toward my apartment. When I looked back again, he had stopped. He was standing on the opposite sidewalk, watching me. I thought that meant he had given up. I was wrong. When I reached my apartment building, I hurried inside and locked the front door behind me. I stood there for a few seconds, breathing heavily. Then I looked through the glass panel beside the entrance. The man was standing across the street. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at the building. I ran upstairs and told my dad what happened. He immediately went downstairs to look, but by then, the man was gone. We thought that was the end of it. About 20 minutes later, my dad heard a car slowly driving past our building. He looked out the window. It was the same rusty truck I had seen outside the store. It stopped directly across from our apartment. The headlights stayed off. My dad watched as the driver sat there for nearly a minute. Then the truck slowly pulled away. We never saw the man again, but years later, whenever I passed that convenience store, I remember his smile. And I still wonder how long he had been watching me before I noticed him. I'm going to tell you about the strangest thing that ever happened to me. I was living with my mom in an old 2-story house in a pretty quiet neighborhood. During the day, everything felt normal, but at night, there was always this weird noise that I couldn't explain. It usually happened around 2 in the morning. I'd be lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I'd hear something moving above me. At first, I thought it was probably mice. It sounded like little footsteps, followed by scratching. Sometimes it sounded like something was dragging itself across the wooden boards. I told my mom about it one morning, but she didn't think much of it. She said the house was old and probably just making noises as it cooled down at night. I figured she was probably right, so I tried to ignore it. For the next few nights, I did my best not to think about it, but the noises slowly got louder. Then one night, I was lying in bed when I heard 3 knocks above me. Knock, knock, knock. I just stared at the ceiling. A few seconds later, I heard scratching. It sounded like something was moving slowly across the other side of the ceiling. Then it stopped, right above my bed. I pulled my blanket over my head and stayed there until I finally fell asleep. The next morning, I asked my mom to check the attic. She went upstairs and looked around for a few minutes. When she came back, she said there was nothing there. No animals, no damage, and no sign that anything had gotten inside. I felt a little better after that, until the noises started again that night. Only this time, they weren't coming from above my room. They were coming from the hallway. I sat up in bed and listened. 3 knocks, then nothing. A few seconds later, 3 more.
I didn't really want to leave my room, but I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The hallway was empty. I slowly walked toward the sound. When I got close to the end of the hallway, the knocking stopped. Then I heard something that made me freeze. Someone whispered from inside the wall. "Hello." I ran back to my room and locked the door. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I told my mom exactly what happened. This time, she believed me. She called someone to come inspect the house.
The contractor found something we didn't know existed. There was a narrow space between the walls in the attic. It wasn't really big enough to stand in, but someone small could probably crawl through it. My mom immediately called the police. They searched the attic and the crawl space. At first, they didn't find anything. Then one of the officers noticed footprints in the dust. They were human footprints. They weren't old either. They led through the crawl space toward the wall outside my bedroom, and then they just stopped. The police searched the area again, but they couldn't figure out where the person had gone. That was enough for my mom. We stayed somewhere else that night. The next morning, we went back with the police to get some of our things. As we were leaving, one of the officers noticed something scratched into the wooden frame around my bedroom door. It said,
"I can hear you." I remember just standing there, staring at it. We moved out not long after that. The police never figured out who had been inside the walls. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. Then, a few months later, my mom got a letter from the people who had moved into the house. They asked her if we'd ever heard strange noises coming from inside the walls. My mom didn't tell them what happened. She just asked why they were asking. They said they'd been hearing knocking every night, 3 knocks at a time. And sometimes they could hear someone whispering from inside the hallway wall. Hello? I still don't know who was in that house. I don't know how they got inside or how long they'd been there. But even now, if I hear 3 knocks in the middle of the night, I don't go looking for the source. I just stay quiet. Because part of me is still afraid that whoever was inside that wall might hear me answer.
It happened to me one Sunday night when I was driving home from a friend's apartment. I lived in a small town outside Phoenix, Arizona, and the drive home usually took around 40 minutes. That night, we'd stayed up talking way later than we planned. By the time I left, it was almost midnight. I was tired, but everything seemed normal. I got into my old pickup truck, turned on the radio, and started driving. About 20 minutes into the drive, I noticed I was almost out of gas. There was a gas station along my usual route, but I still had a few miles to go before I reached it. I figured I'd make it. The road was pretty empty by then. No houses, no streetlights, no other cars, just the desert on both sides and my headlights lighting up the road in front of me. Then I saw someone standing in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was someone who needed help. I slowed down. The person didn't move. As I got closer, I realized it was a little girl. She looked maybe 8 or 9 years old. She was wearing a light-colored dress and had her back toward me. I remember thinking how strange it was to see a kid standing alone out there at that time of night. I stopped a few feet away and rolled down my window. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She just slowly turned her head toward me. That's when I noticed how pale she was. She wasn't crying or asking for help. She was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. There was something about it that made me uncomfortable right away. I locked the doors and reached for the gear shift. Then she raised her hand and pointed behind my truck. I looked in the rearview mirror. There was nothing there. When I looked back at her, she was standing right beside my driver's window. I hadn't seen her move. She leaned toward the glass and whispered something. I could barely hear her. "Don't let him see you." My heart started pounding. Before I could ask her what she meant, something slammed onto the roof of my truck. The whole vehicle shook. I looked up. Then I heard footsteps. Someone was walking across the roof, slowly. The girl stopped smiling. For the first time, she looked scared. She backed away from my window and pointed down the road. I didn't think about it. I hit the gas. The truck took off and I kept driving until I reached the gas station. I ran inside and told the cashier what had happened. He listened quietly. Then he asked me what the girl looked like. I described her. The expression on his face changed. He told me a little girl had been killed on that same road several years earlier. She had been walking home with her father when a car hit them. She died at the scene. Her father survived, but according to the cashier, he disappeared a few days later.
I honestly didn't know what to think. Then I heard something behind me. Tap. 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 I turned around. Nothing. I went outside anyway. My truck was still sitting under the gas station lights. That's when I noticed something on the roof. There were 4 small, muddy footprints. They started near the front windshield and ended directly above the driver's seat. I haven't driven that road at night since. But every once in a while, when I'm driving alone and hear something hit the roof of my car, I think about that girl. And I still remember exactly what she whispered to me. Don't let him see you.